If God is a moral being, and if halakhah represents our understanding of God's will for us, then halakhah and morality cannot ever be in conflict. Halakhah and morality cannot ever be in conflict. And indeed, the overwhelming majority of the time, that's how we experience halakhah, as a particular set of expectations that enhance and deepen our general experience of striving for goodness and meaning. Some of us are better at some mitzvot than others, but those with open hearts to Torah can acknowledge the power and purpose of a life of religious responsibility and obligation. And I think we can even say we are ennobled by it. But some percentage of the time, we experience conflict. We think we know what the halakhah demands, and we think we know the right thing to do, and they are not the same. And those moments are extremely scary and deeply destabilizing to us as committed Jews and moral human beings. How do we deal with those moments of conflict? Now, our temptation is often to posit a contradiction between halakhah and morality. Two conflicting value systems ask for our allegiance, and the only question is, which will we prefer? And the tragic nature of that choice can draw us in. The religious hero will follow the law despite his moral qualms, whereas the champion of morality will abrogate the law in the name of true divine service. But either will sacrifice one set of demands on the altar of the other. And in fact, either of those outcomes signals failure. They are both theologically unacceptable and they are religiously reckless. It's theologically unacceptable and a betrayal of the Torah itself to claim that God's will, as manifest through halakhah, is immoral. The ostensibly humble claim that divine morality only seems immoral when considered in human terms is actually nothing but deep cynicism and alienation that masquerades as piety. How can it possibly be religiously praiseworthy and pious to ascribe to God traits and values that you would abhor in a fellow human being? When we claim to submit to a halakhah in spite of its apparent immorality, we may think we are honoring God despite ourselves, but in fact, we thereby disrespect God and halakhah, casting them as immoral in human terms. And allowing this seeming contradiction to stand is not only theologically unacceptable, but it is religiously reckless as well. When we posit that halakhah and morality can conflict, then these concepts become competitors. And we are certain either to lose any sense of our morality or to become alienated from God in the process. Is there really more than a hair's breadth between proclaiming fealty to the rabbinic system despite its immorality and jettisoning its strictures because they are immoral? How long before such submission gives way to revolutionary rebellion? If we only obey God and halakhah because of their authority, and not because of deep identification with the message that God delivers, why would we expect our long-term relationship with God and halakhah to be any different than our relationship with Paro and other tyrants whose repressive regimes we escaped at the first opportunity? Instead, the true religious journey is one devoted to eliminating the gap between halakhah and morality by committing ourselves to two critical processes. First, the study of halakhah and the fulfillment of mitzvot is meant not just to mold our behavior, but to shape our character. A deep engagement with halakhah often will and should refine my understanding of what is moral, teaching me something that perhaps I did not understand before. Amar Rabbi Yosei b'Rabbi Chanina, ein divrei Torah mitkaimin ela b'mi she'ma'amid atzmo arom aleihen. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, ein divrei Torah mitkaimin ela b'mi she'mesim atzmo kemi she'eino. Said Rabbi Yosei b'Rabbi Chanina, words of Torah can only survive inside of someone who stands naked in front of them. Said Rabbi Yochanan, words of Torah can only survive inside of someone who feigns non-existence. My first task when I experience conflict between halakhah and morality is to assume the goodness of God's word and to deeply learn the halakhah in order to understand it, gaining insight into its purpose and its underlying meaning. And sometimes that process alone closes the gap. My ethical and moral universe is enlarged, and my perspective is changed. I emerge wiser, and I identify now with the halakhah in question, ready to make whatever sacrifices are necessary to ensure its fulfillment, even though it may be difficult or even painful, but not immoral to do so. But a second element of closing the gap involves ensuring that I am applying halakhah correctly to my life. That I, or a proper guide, have plumbed the depths of this rich discourse to discover its subtleties and nuances. An intensive engagement with halakhah usually reveals that you are not the first person to grapple with the dilemma at hand. And through deep learning with figures from the past and the present, I thereby engage my concerns directly, and I find the ways in which those concerns are reflected in the halachic conversation. This can close the gap from the other direction, as I realize that halakhah has much more to say than I originally thought. The ultimate religious heresy is allowing yourself to be content, resting in a place where your ethical and halachic conclusions diverge and contradict one another. Something must give. You must either revisit the obviousness of your ethical convictions, or you must learn more and discover the elements of the halachic conversation that can give voice to your moral impulse in halachic language. And usually, you must do more than a little of both. Must we submit to halakhah? Absolutely. The power of God's law serves to strengthen our will and to fight the human weakness that often prevents us from fulfilling our known duty. Pirkei Avot says, Batel ritzoncha mipnei ritzono. Nullify your own will when it conflicts with the divine will. Don't allow your desire to be lazy and self-serving prevent you from serving others and from serving God, as is your intended destiny. But let us be unambiguous. We submit to mitzvot in order to control the id, not to crush the superego. Jews must be servants of God and must devote their energies to fulfilling mitzvot, even at great cost and inconvenience. But we do so in order to answer the call of the better angels of our nature, becoming the people we know we ought to be. A soldier goes off to fight knowing he may die, but believing in the cause, he is proud of the sacrifice he is prepared to make. So too, we must be prepared to sacrifice for mitzvot. But our religious journey is not to negate our moral core in the name of a morally inscrutable and foreign higher power, but instead to properly understand and apply the mitzvot, and thereby to come to identify with them. We need a halakhah of chiyuv, obligation and responsibility, not tziyut, blind obedience. We need authority that stems from a claim of goodness and wisdom, not authoritarianism. We need respect for the content of our halachot, as opposed to mere slavish obedience to their form. Our respect for them should flow from coming to understand the ideas and values behind the mitzvot, and should inspire a corollary commitment to take them seriously as adding meaning and purpose to our lives. We should be devoted to a God who endows us with moral and religious instincts and challenges us to develop them as completely as we can. Rather than viewing halakhah as an obstacle to overcome or a bitter pill to swallow, we should see it as a language in which we can speak our religious instincts, as a religious life force that courses through the body of our people, animating the complex decisions we must make on a daily basis. Let us talk about the actual values embedded within this extraordinarily rich discourse. Let us bring halachic content and meaning to bear on our lives. Let us question our moral assumptions by engaging with the wisdom of sage voices from the past. And let us find a pathway for our lives encoded in halakhah's holy language.